call a special council meeting for Tuesday, November 4th, 2014, City of Port Orchard to order, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome. We'll move on to our special council meeting agenda, which number 2, citizens' comments. Now, I'd like to remind the citizens they have 3 minutes to make a comment on anything that they would like to comment on. However, the special meeting is to have a public hearing, so if it's all right with you, just make comments to other things other than, and then save your comments for the public hearing when it has something to do with that public hearing. So anyway, general comments. I don't have anybody signed up, but if you'd like to make a general comment, raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Council, what's your pleasure?
Approve the agenda.
Okay, approve the agenda, yes.
I move that we approve the agenda as distributed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion, comments? Seeing none, we're going to approve the special council meeting agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Thank you, that motion carries. We don't have a consent agenda. We have no presentation, so we'll move on to public hearing. Public hearing and consideration of the 2014 Comprehensive Plan amendments. Mr. Bond, could you tell us a little about this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of council. I first want to say I appreciate you being willing to come out for a special meeting tonight on election night. I didn't actually realize it was election night until after I had scheduled this, but anyway, thanks for coming. I know we had a long meeting last night, and it's good this time of year to get some of these things out of the way. The item before you tonight for the public hearing are the 2014 Comprehensive Plan amendments. The City Council originally recommended or approved an agenda of amendments that contained 8 amendments. One of those was subsequently withdrawn by Council at the last meeting concerning the UGA boundary. Since then, staff brought forward 2 additional amendments that we would like to add to the docket for 2014, and those come with a Planning Commission recommendation. The amendments, as I mentioned, have all been recommended by the have all been reviewed by the Planning Commission at public hearings held both in September and October of this year. And the 8 amendments before the City Council are outlined in the staff report that are before you and include the South Kitsap School District Amendment, the Living Hope Community Baptist Church Amendment, the Vogel Amendment, the Bethel Road LLC Amendment, the Parks Plan Amendments, the Local Centers Amendment, the Transportation Plan Amendment, and the Capital Facilities Plan Amendment. And I've discussed this with the mayor, but what we'd like to do once we open the public hearing is to call for testimony on each of the amendments one by one. And that way, and as right before testimony, I will explain the details of each of the proposed amendments, and then the public can provide testimony. After we've gotten through all 8 amendments, we will have a council discussion on the proposal. And council can ask questions of staff, and that ultimately the discussion is going to help me craft an ordinance that you can vote on at the second meeting of November, which will be the official action on the amendments. And if at that meeting something in the ordinance needs to be changed, we can revise it for the December meeting and bring it back to you once again. So without further ado, Mayor, if you would like to open the public hearing, we'll discuss the school district amendment first.
Very good. I hereby open the public hearing. And could you tell us about the South Kitsap School District Amendment, please?
Yes, the South Kitsap School District Amendment is a request for a comprehensive plan map amendment and rezone for 2 sites. This includes the 57.29 acre future high school site on Figley Road and a 2.5 acre portion of the Hoover Avenue campus area, changing it from R4.5 and R8 zoning and residential low to medium, medium density comprehensive plan designations. These would be changing all of those areas to community facilities zoning and public and community spaces designation in the comprehensive plan. And the recommendation on this from the Planning Commission is to approve the amendments. The staff recommendation is to approve the amendments. And at the previous Planning Commission public hearing, testimony was provided orally, which is reflected in the minutes provided to you, and written comments on the proposed amendments was also submitted. Just a note about this particular amendment, and in the Planning Commission discussion, what was mentioned was that these sites, at least the high school site, was annexed into the city. At the time that it was annexed, it was designated as a residential zone rather than being given the community facility zone. And so the school district just wants all of its property to essentially have that community facility zoning so that they can operate schools and school district facilities on their property.
Okay. This is a public hearing, and I don't have anybody signed up on the South Kitsap School District amendment, but if you would like to testify, please raise your hand to be identified. Come up, give your testimony, please. Last chance, testimony on number 1, South Kitsap School District amendment. All right, we'll move on then. Could you lead us into number 2?
The second amendment before you is the Living Hope Community Baptist Church amendment. And this proposal was for a comprehensive plan map amendment and rezone of the site with an existing church facility, changing it from residential medium density to commercial / business professional 1. So the comp plan designation would be commercial and the zoning would be business professional 1. This site is located across the street from a business professional area by the county campus, the government campus up there on Sydney. And they're looking to, they stated in their hearing they were looking to repurpose that building, and being that it was constructed as a church, they don't have the zoning to do a whole lot with it. The Planning Commission recommendation on this one was to deny the application. The staff recommendation was to approve the application, and in your packet you'll find that written testimony was received and oral testimony was given at the Planning Commission public hearing.
Okay. Once again, I would like to take public testimony on Living Hope Community Baptist Church amendment. So if you raise your hand, if you'd like to address the council. Yes, sir.
Good evening.
If you could pull your mic up just a little bit, because you're pretty tall. All right, thank you.
My name is Joe Parkinson. I'm the pastor of Living Hope Community Baptist Church, and I'm here representing our congregation. And we're asking you to vote in favor of changing the comprehensive plan designation for our property, which is located on the corner of Sydney and Division, right across, almost diagonal from the county courthouse properties. There's some folks that are here from our church, just a handful of us, but I'd like them to stand as well, just so you know as I speak. I'm speaking for all of us. You guys all stand from Living Hope.
Welcome. Thank you. Okay.
Living Hope is a congregation that's committed to the community of Port Orchard. Obviously, we do a lot of the stuff that the churches do, but we do a lot of other stuff too, working with the schools in a lot of different ways. One of the biggest things that we've been involved in has been a community soccer program, and we've done that for 11 years. I believe, to the best of my knowledge, it's the largest program in Port Orchard. This last year we had 121 kids, and the church underwrites a significant portion of that to be able to give back and to get kids into the program. The church building that we're talking about was built in 1945. That means it's been in existence for 69 years. And we've come to the realization that what worked for a church in 1945 doesn't really work today as far as the zoning requirements and the facilities and such. In fact, you couldn't put a church on that lot today because the regulations wouldn't allow it, and that's a good thing. For instance, in our congregation, we have 1.5 people per car that drive the church for worship services. So if you had 100 people in a worship service, that means you would need at least 65 parking spots. Currently, we have 12 if we pack everybody in. Another thing is, as a church, we want to be sensitive to our community and our neighbors. We want to be good neighbors, and we're aware of that. As our ministry has grown, we're maxing out the use of the building. Currently, we're using that facility 7 days a week, from morning through evening. It's used during the days for our staff offices, for counseling, for Bible studies, other things. And then it's used on the evenings and the weekends for our youth program, our student ministries that we run on Sunday evenings, a large program, our worship team practices, assorted studies, counseling, leadership team meetings, and special services. So our planning for the next steps has brought us to the place of requesting the zoning change so that the building can be repurposed in a way that would be beneficial for everyone involved and especially for the community. The current zoning of this parcel, as I understand it, allows for 3 uses of that plot. One is as a residence, the other is for a residence business where the proprietors live in the facility, and third is for a church with a conditional use permit. The site has been a church for almost 70 years. It's currently configured as a church, and without any zoning changes, it would continue as a church. Yet as our ministry has grown, we've become aware of the impact of operating a church at this location. We have worked very hard to be good neighbors, and we work very hard at maintaining our facility, upkeeping the appearance so that it's an attractive building in Port Orchard. We've worked with our neighbors. On the downhill side, we've worked to clean up the boundaries. At our expense and labor, we took out several significantly sized trees that were rotted on the inside that would have been a detriment to all of the surrounding parcels had we had a windstorm and they had gone over. We've worked with the renter behind our property to keep noise down, and in fact, we've even gone to the point of talking to our people about leaving his parking spot open in front of his house. We've done the same thing for an adjacent neighbor who backed out of their driveway and asked us if we could leave a space for them to be able to get out of their driveway. And it's our desire that for any future changes to the use of the facility that we're very sensitive to the community. We believe that the Business Professional 1 zoning could accomplish just that. It's consistent with the other adjacent properties, as has already been mentioned. And this would limit the facility to professional use. We don't think of churches, buildings particularly, or churches as businesses. But in many ways, that's what it is. And even the building itself is a commercial structure and has fallen under the commercial structural guidelines and codes for almost 70 years. The designation would more likely result in a reduction in traffic impact that we are causing because of the number of people. It would reduce in a parking impact that on evenings and weekends, and it would also more than likely significantly reduce the noise impact. Because when you have that many people in a residential neighborhood that are parking on the streets, you get the sounds of opening and closing doors, you get people talking, visiting after events, and so forth. The proposed request has been posted for a number of months. Obviously, you guys are familiar with the procedure of requesting a change like this. And there have been no negative responses throughout the hearing process that we are aware of. There were no neighbors present at the public hearing. It was just our own representatives, and there were no comments, obviously, there. There was one email from our neighbor, the guy that lives directly behind us, and we've worked very diligently with him, and he is in favor of the change because it'll bring more quiet to the neighborhood. We also held a public open house on October 7th, and we emailed everybody on the list, notifying all of our neighbors that by mail that we were interested in their input and wanted them to share with them what we were doing, and if there's anything that we could do to work with them to make it more attractive to them, we were open to do that. We also gave them a contact phone number as well as an email. And the October 7th meeting came, and basically there was no response. Nobody showed up. To us, it seems like everybody understands that the building has been there for 70 years as a commercial structure, and in fact, the business professional change would enable us to explore some options that are before us that we don't have any plans immediately. We have to work through some things. We understand, has been mentioned, that the professional planning staff has also recommended this change, and we would appreciate your consideration and voting in favor of this recommendation. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Please,
allowed
yes. Yeah, I think,
We can ask questions?
yes, I think it'd be a good idea, yeah.
I'm listening, and I don't have any prejudice one way or another, but you're saying you're investigating, looking into, use repurpose. What? I mean, what is it that this is going to do for you? I don't quite understand.
Well, we're looking at possibly, we've been talking through this, we don't have anything hard and fast, but maybe turning it into like a counseling center, maybe possibly renting out some of the space that we use to help generate some revenue for the church as we begin to look at other options. And
How does
go
it change the parking and the noise? What? How does that happen?
Well, that's all going to diminish. Is that if we have to rent another facility because of our size for some of the public gatherings, that's going to decrease what we do.
Oh, I see. So you're saying repurpose, meaning you're going to move out.
Yeah, that's one.
Congregation's gonna go for
we're
another-
too early to say on that, but that's one possibility, definitely.
Okay, so you're just looking for other options to use the building
Right.
more efficiently and repurpose whatever. Okay, I get it. Great, thanks.
Yes.
Do you have any idea why the Planning Commission denied your request?
I don't.
I can just speak to that real quick. What was mentioned in the Planning Commission meeting was that when they did the plan for the county campus, it was decided that one side of Sydney would be business professional and the other side would be residential. And so this, was a deviation from what was talked about back when they made that plan. But beyond that, I don't think that there were a whole lot of other reasons presented. Stephanie, do you recall anything? Yeah, I think that was the main reason. It goes back to the original planning of the county campus.
So Nick, does somebody else have their hand up? So Nick, all the business professional in the area that Pastor was talking about are on the other side of the street, or is there some on the same side?
Yeah, all of the business professional is on the west side of the street, and so everything on the east side is residential, but immediately across the street from this particular property, it is business professional. So
Okay.
it's close enough that it's an acceptable rezone to approve.
Yes.
A quick question, Nick. Do you know if the county commissioners or the county administrator is aware of this, since it has to do with the government campus up there?
No, they were sent notice of all the amendments, but they certainly didn't comment or call and ask any questions.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Actually, Nick, where we had the former coroner's office on the east side of Sydney, I believe there are currently law offices there. Is that zoned community facility still, or is it business professional, or do you,
It's zoned residential,
where the law offices are?
yeah.
And we're allowing offices there.
It was established,
Come to my-
Grandfather then?
This is Stephanie Andrews, our associate planner, by the way. She reviewed all the applications, so I had asked her to come in case there were questions like this.
we've looked at a few of those businesses along the street that have been established historically, and some of them came up without any permitting process, and it was, it was long enough ago that we can't recreate what happened or how it happened and what the review process was. Some of these things, when our old process, things didn't always come through community development for review when new tenants would move in. So our process has changed a lot in the last 7 or 8 years, so that we require different things of a business when they move in, so these are caught. But everything on the east side of Sydney is still residential.
It's zoned residential.
It's zoned residential. It's
community
not necessarily
facilities?
used as residential.
The county has their, I forget the acronyms, it's some sort of, I can't remember it now. It's on the corner of Ada and Sydney. It's not DSHS, but it's something.
Like the special victims.
Support services, yeah.
Yeah,
SAIV or something. Is that also zoned residential?
yes.
Wow, how'd they get away with that?
Or that may be public facilities. There's,
Or was it community facilities or something? Also, the county owns one of the churches on the other side of the street where Department of Natural Resources of the county had their offices. So
And
that's
that-
also zoned residential.
Yeah, that building, I'm almost certain that one is zoned residential. But if you look at the maps that are in the file under the 813 rezone, it does, show the existing zoning on that whole side is all yellow for residential.
Put the map under the overhead here. So the parcel in question is this parcel, which is that piece going that way. And so everything on the west side here is business professional and I guess that's commercial in red. And then on the east side, it's all residential.
Okay, other questions? Thank you very much.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes,
too,
you can.
Is that it's pretty obvious that it's a commercial structure that is there. And when you look at all the other buildings that are surrounding it, they're all residential. And I guess I don't see would see a issue with having a situation where you allow for a building that's been there for 70 years, that's been a commercial building, that's been a church. And I guess that would just be my response to what I've heard in this whole process. So thank you.
Thank you. Is anybody else wish to address the council on number 2? Yes.
Bill Michael, 228 Seattle Avenue. I do live in the outskirts of this area, and I've been on the Planning Commission for, call it 19 years in a couple months. We've had numerous conversations throughout the years that I've been on the commission about the dividing line of the county facilities, both on the east and the west side of the county facilities and on the north and the south side. Several years ago, we did, at the behest of both the staff at the time and several, community members, create the Business Professional District. At that time, there were numerous meetings on not only where the boundaries were, but where and why certain parcels would be zoned and designated community facilities and business professional. It was decided that by both the council and the Planning Commission, staff and the residents and the property owners in the area, that the dividing line would be Sidney. And it was very specific that that would be where the dividing line is. While I appreciate what the church is trying to do, and I support the members, and I do thank them for coming here, I've been involved in various churches, several of them in downtown large cities, and we face the same issues. The city has a set of goals in separating the business professional district by, I believe it's Kendall, White on the south side or the north side of the county campus, and Sidney to the east and Klein to the west, limits the growth of the community or the county facility. And I don't mean limit in a negative sense. I mean it defines it, it concentrates the use, it concentrates the development in a set specific way, and it keeps the residential properties in that area as residential. If the church is to take the other side or a complementary side, if the church is to the point where it does need to expand and does need to find additional facilities, it could use the property that they have now for some of the ancillary meetings that they've said that they need to have with the growing congregation size. 100 in a congregation, by my experience, is a good time and a good financial base to look for another site to have your main congregational meetings. An ancillary site could be used for Bible studies, childcare, and various other ideas or uses. So I support the continued retention of the property by the church. But one of the things that we heard in the Planning Commission meeting was that this request was being requested to possibly sell the property. I would hesitate to designate it business professional so it enhances the sale of the property. I fully understand the reason for them wanting to do that from a commercial side, that it makes it more saleable. But I would ask the council to maintain the present zoning so it clearly delineates in our community the line between business professional, the county campus, and the residential to the east. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're still taking testimony on item 2. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Steve Miller. I'm a member of the church, and I feel that I need to address those concerns. One of my jobs that I do is I'm a union representative, and one of the big issues we deal with is what's fair and equitable. I understand, and we all understand, the dividing line and the reasons behind it, except the questions that you brought up is there are, in fact, other businesses that have offices on that side of the street, and one of the council members said, gee, how did they get away with that? We're all wondering the same thing. There is an issue of what's fair and what's equitable. Are we going to allow, or are you going to allow other businesses to be there regardless if they slip through and not even consider this? As far as us having a plan to make this marketable, that could be true. We have no plans right now to be able to do that. The congregation size doesn't warrant that right now, except right now we're really kind of handcuffed with just the use that we have. We're just looking for flexibility, different options to be able to use it. Now, if you decide that this is not a good idea, and excuse me, Joe, for stepping in, but then you're leaving the church with no choice at all but to continue to use this building and grow, which unfortunately it will be an impact on the community. As the youth ministry grows, youth activities are going to take place there, and that hampers, you know, what's going on in the neighborhood. We don't want to do that. We do want to be good neighbors, and we've worked hard to do that. But we do want to be, we're not going to have a choice. We're going to have to use that building to the best of our ability that we can if we're tied into that. And we don't want to have a negative impact on that. A negative impact is on the community, is a negative impact on the church. And that's not our intent. We're just looking for flexibility for it. I understand those concerns, but if you go up the street, there's lawyers' offices up there. We don't have anything in our plan right now. We're just looking for the flexibility. And I hope you just consider the fair and equitable thing, what's already there, taking place. It's not impacting what's there already for the other businesses, is not having a negative impact. This is not encroachment on the neighborhood. If you look at it, the church is a church building. It looks like a church building. It does not look like a residence. That's not going to change. So it's not like we're going to destroy the view of that area. It's not going to happen. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
One more question. Nick, excuse me, Nick. I don't recall clearly the economic development survey that we just did. I recall there was a question in there when it came to city centers that this is one of them that we designated, that the survey participants were asked whether or not mixing residential with, and I think it was light industrial, I think wood carving shop comes to mind. Was the question asked about business professional as well as the light industrial?
I don't think it quite applies to the situation here, but there was a question in that survey that had to do with prioritizing centers. Okay. But I don't know off the top of my head what that said. But I don't think there was a real specific question that would address this particular issue.
Okay, thank you.
All right, last chance to discuss or to give your opinion on item 2. Okay, then, we'll move on to item 3, the Vogel Amendment. Mr. Bond.
All right, the Vogel Amendment is a request for a comprehensive plan map amendment and rezone to change the designation of a portion of property from Greenbelt to commercial. And this is a challenging one to present because the Planning Commission actually made a recommendation at the last meeting for a modified approval, which would be instead of granting the commercial designation to grant residential designation. So it would go from, instead of going from Greenbelt to commercial, it would go from Greenbelt to residential in the comp plan, and then it would get a residential, was it R8? R8 zoning, which is 8 units per acre on the upper portion of property above the ravine. The Planning Commission had also recommended a slightly different line be drawn to divide the greenbelt from the new residential designation on the map. And so after that meeting, which, you know, in sitting here as staff and hearing the proposal, it sounds like a reasonable proposal, and I think that it's a decent compromise. However, I brought this up to the interim city attorney, who said that the city council really ought to either approve or deny the application as submitted, that by amending the proposed application, there's a number of legal issues, not the least of which is that the SEPA determination that was issued when we did environmental review on the proposal was based on the application that was filed. And so if we take an action that is not based in the SEPA decision that was issued, we would be essentially failing to accurately do SEPA on the proposal. Now, that's not to say that we can't go back and change SEPA, but that's going to delay this process into next year based on the timelines that are required, because we have to reissue notices to Commerce and reissue the SEPA decision. And I think there's some other issues that if the council wanted to go with the recommendation of Planning Commission, that she would want to talk to you about. The staff recommendation based on the application that's received, which was to change this from Greenbelt to commercial, was to deny the proposal. And finally, there was extensive public testimony received from a lot of the neighboring properties owners who live on Bill Avenue, and there was quite a bit of written and oral testimony. And so I'll let you open the hearing on this one or call for comments.
Okay. Yeah. So we do want to go ahead and take comments on this. Yes. Anybody would like to make a comment to the council about the Vogel Amendment? Raise your hand, please.
Gil Michael, 228 Seattle Avenue, and I'll speak as a member of the Planning Commission. 2 years ago, actually let me back up even further than that. In 2002, staff proposed a policy to revise the Greenbelt designation of certain parcels along Blackjack Creek that was at the time north of the Lund Avenue, Southeast Lund Avenue Bridge. In the particular area that we're talking about, the Greenbelt at the time was plus or minus, well, it was 200 feet either side of the Blackjack Creek. Blackjack Creek is the center of these three lines right here. The parcels that we're talking about are right here along Southeast Lund Avenue, right along here. The policy that was proposed at the time was to essentially, if a parcel contained Greenbelt in it, then the whole parcel, with the exception of 3 parcels all along Blackjack Creek from the bridge to the inlet, were designated in their entirety as Greenbelt. This just happened to be one of those parcels. At the time, I felt that this was unfair because it took developable land that could be used in the future, which we are at now, for someone to develop the property into the concurrent zoning on either side of the existing parcels. The parcel that we're talking about actually extends. This would be Blackjack Creek, the center line along here. This parcel actually extends over to here.
An area that's outside of the view.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. The center of Blackjack Creek goes here. This parcel actually is a 10-acre plus parcel, and we're talking about what the Planning Commission decided was from this point right here to this point right here was to make this part of it right up here residential 8. This is the existing zoning, and this darker yellow compared to this yellow is all residential 8. This light colored zoning is residential 4.5. I do agree with Mr. Bond that the preponderance, in fact, I would say the 100% of the people that got up and testified actually said they do not want commercial. And the Planning Commission agreed with that, and I agreed with that, because you don't want a commercial parcel right here in the middle of residential, or the access difficulties that would create no matter what was there. So the compromise, as Mr. Bond said, the Planning Commission came up with was to designate this parcel commercial. Residential, I'm sorry. If it's in the best interest of the city, and if staff concurs with that and with the lawyer's office, the council 2 years ago or last year put this off to this year. And if all this would take would be a reevaluation of the process to get the attorney to provide the standards of a new application, I would ask that the council would allow this to be brought forth next year in the same manner that you did from last year to this year. I do support what the Planning Commission approved, and if it does, as Mr. Bond said, if it is in the city's best interest to not move this forward, I would ask that you would allow the applicant next year to bring this forward in the same manner that he did this year. Thank you very much.
All right, we're taking testimony on item 3, Vogel Amendment. Anybody else wish to speak to this amendment? Any other comments? All right, we'll move on then to item 4, Planning Commission Bethel Road LLC. Mr. Bond.
Okay, the Bethel Road LLC Kvinsland Amendment is for a comprehensive plan map amendment and a rezone to adjust the split zoning delineation on a property which is partially zoned greenbelt and partially zoned commercial to more accurately follow the top of the slope. The Planning Commission recommendation on this amendment is to deny. The staff recommendation is to deny, and we did not receive any public testimony, including from the applicant at the public hearing at the Planning Commission.
All right, we'll be taking testimony. If you'd like to make testimony, please raise your hand and be recognized. Bethel Road LLC. Bethel Road LLC, last chance. Okay, we'll move on then to number 5, Parks Plan Amendment.
The Parks Plan Amendment is a request for actually several amendments to the Parks Plan as submitted by the mayor. They concern designating what is known in the comp plan as South Park for use as an off-leash dog park, to designate Lundberg Park as a barrier-free ADA accessible park, and to correct a naming discrepancy concerning Clayton Park. The Planning Commission recommendation was to approve Two of the three proposed amendments, including renaming Central Park as Clayton Park and designating South Park as an off-leash dog park, and the recommendation was to deny the Lundberg Park amendment. The staff recommendation was to approve all three, and we did receive public testimony on this, and it's reflected in the minutes that were provided to you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to be taking testimony now on the Parks Plan amendments before you. Raise your hand if you'd like to testify. Okay, gentleman in front, lady in the second row next.
My name is George Warrington. I live in South Kitsap area, and I want to address the South Park designation. I have property just to the north of that, adjacent to it. I'm going to read a letter that I've written up. I'm going to give a copy to the council. In reference to the community park, South Park, located at 4940 Bethel Road Southeast, it is requested the name of the subject park be renamed H&T Trip Park. Although although the donating family was not an outstanding or prominent family, the name change is memory of the donating family. This family, they donated this property to the city of Port Orchard as a park. Mrs. and Mr. Harold and Telly Tripp, which willed the memory, willed the property to the city of Port Orchard for use as a city park. I know that's been a problem, I understand, through the years about having that only as a park, but that's, so far it stood. It is typically the public use properties retain the name of the donor. You've got other parks in the area, Van Zee and Howe Park in South Kitsap and Port Orchard. Those names stayed. I believe it would be appropriate and honorable to name the park in memory of the family which allowed the parcel, the ground. 5.19 acres to be used as a city park for all to use, which is ongoing. Rename the park in honor of the Tripps may also promote incentive and other families and property owners to donate properties to the city of Port Orchard or other government-controlled areas for the use by the public. This request is submitted for adoption by the Port Orchard City Council. This is something that I'd like to see happen. The Tripps have been there for many decades. I moved out there in the early 70s, and they were residing on that property back in the early 70s. I understood they bought it back in the 50s. Also Petersons, they live next to that property also. They're right on the corner of Bethel and Sedgwick. So I'm going to submit this, and I'd like to have consideration for renaming that park after the donors of that property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have, actually, though this is a separate subject, tonight we're taking testimony on including the dog park in part of that South Park, and we didn't have a discussion set up about the name of that. And South Park actually isn't an official name, it's just a descriptive name.
No, I understand that, but once it gets on the record for a long enough time, it'll basically
It has a tendency.
be accepted.
Okay.
We also have a South Kitsap Park, about 5 miles from there. That's up at the Lund area. And so we got two names that are very close. Somebody says South Park or South Kitsap Park in Port Orchard. Which one is it?
Okay, I got you.
May have a conflict on that later on. But
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Bond, would it be possible to provide the speaker with the appropriate application to have the park name changed?
Yeah, and what I would actually recommend is if the council wants to have that considered, is the council could sponsor the amendment and send it to the Planning Commission for review, because there is a fee associated with it if it comes from an individual. And so I would recommend at a separate meeting that a motion be made that we consider this on the 2015 docket.
Yes, Mr. Clausen.
Is naming a park really a comp plan?
Well,
Yep.
the only place the official name of the park is found is in the comprehensive plan. And so that park, the only place it has any name is in that document. And so it's really a housekeeping amendment, but it's still, it still requires an amendment to change it in all of your capital facilities plans and in the park plan and in the comprehensive plan element. I don't think I'd have to go look in our code, but our municipal code doesn't have a lot on parks, and so I don't think the names of the parks are officially established anywhere in code.
I still question whether it needs to be a part of the comp plan amendment process.
Yeah,
That's a
I think-
function of this body to name a park. It's no different than us naming a street.
Yeah, I think it just requires a housekeeping type of amendment annually, and so I would just say that you could make a motion to officially change the name and also to file a housekeeping amendment to change it in all of our official documents as part of the amendment cycle.
So if we were to make that at the next council meeting, for example, then as housekeeping, you could make those adjustments.
Yeah, it would go through the process next year, but it would be a very straightforward thing.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, go.
Yes, please.
That clock is wrong.
Thank you for your suggestion. Who wants to name a park after a really repulsive cartoon anyway, right? So KT Arthur, 1200 Bethel, and I'm here to address the dog park part of the park. And as most of you know, I'm very involved with the dog park, the dog community around here. I'd like to encourage every forward motion that we could go with getting a dog park going there. As some of you may or may not know, the Howe Farm / Long Lake Dog Park has actually become a destination park for people not only in the county, but outside of the county, where people will come from Shelton and Gig Harbor and Poulsbo because they don't have those resources, and they spend the day or at least several hours here, and they spend money here, which means that we get more tax dollars for our bark. I think that anytime we can support the dog community, it's a great thing. For 4 years, I traveled for work, and I had my dog with me all the time. I have been to probably a couple hundred dog parks, and one of the things that was my takeaway from every community that had a dog park was that the health of the community was reflected in their dog parks and how well they respected and treated the dogs and their owners or their caretakers and what they wanted to do with the dogs. So unfortunately, I got the notice about this aspect of this council meeting very late, like yesterday. Otherwise, I would have worked on it a little bit harder, but just as a casual query of the audience or people here, how many of you are dog owners and would like to use a park like this? And I hope a few of you. Okay, one, great, thank you. And two, but dog owners really have become a big part of this community. We now have the swim deck that accepts dogs. We have the Central Market that accepts dogs, Port Orchard Market that accepts dogs. So really, this is an aspect of the population that we should not ignore. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're still taking testimony on number 5. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to number 6, Local Centers Amendment.
Okay, the Local Centers Amendment, this is a text amendment to the land use element of the comprehensive plan to identify centers of local importance consistent with countywide planning policies element E and element F. The Planning Commission recommendation was to approve. The staff recommendation was also to approve, and no public testimony was received. And I'd just like to add as a little description to this, the reason that this is coming up is, number one, with the annexations that the city completed, there's only 3 local centers identified in the countywide planning policies, and they're planning on talking about this next year at the KRCC. And by taking action now, we can then forward on to the KRCC the centers that have been identified in our local plan that can be put on this list. What that potentially means, and at least this is true in Pierce County, but the scoring system for transportation funds that's applied in some of the regional pools give extra points when a project is located in an identified local center. And so the real benefit of identifying these centers and also laying them out so that they include most of our main corridors is that our main corridors are potentially, if the scoring system is in place, eligible for an additional point, which makes them more competitive for grant dollars. And the intent would be to do some sub-area planning for each of these areas at a later date, but by at least identifying general boundaries of the centers in the town or in the city, we're getting our foot in the door with the KRCC and kind of getting on to this strategy that's been identified for the 2016 Comprehensive Plan update.
Okay. We'll be taking testimony now for number 6, Local Centers Amendment. Does anybody wish to comment? Anyone? Okay, you don't see anyone. Council, any comments? We'll move on then. Number 6, Transportation Plan Amendment.
The Transportation Plan Amendment, this was a late submittal that was submitted by the Public Works Director for review to the Planning Commission. The issue at hand, we wrote a 2011 transportation plan that was adopted by the City Council in 2012. In the Council's approving ordinance, it said that the intent was to put that on the agenda for a comp plan amendment so that it becomes a part of your comprehensive plan. Unfortunately, later in 2012, that was never filed or reviewed by the Planning Commission, and so the document was never officially adopted as an element of the comp plan. Additionally, the 6-year street plan that you adopt annually is actually supposed to be part of your comprehensive plan as well, and there's a number of reasons for both of these things, not the least of which is that they're the basis for requiring improvements of developers when they come forward with a development application. They relate to impact fees, they relate to your ability to get grant funding, and so the recommendation is to adopt, even though this is an older document, adopt it as an official document by reference in the comprehensive plan, as well as the current 6-year street plan, which is the spreadsheet you adopt every year. And then next year in the budget, you'll see that there's an update to the transportation element anyway, so you'll have a chance to update that document if there are things that you don't like about it now. But anyway, that's I think the gist of it.
All right. Public, we're going to be taking testimony on number 7, Transportation Plan Amendment. Anybody wish to address the council? Speak to this. Anyone? All right, we'll move on to 8, Capital Facilities Plan Amendment.
Okay, again, this was a late addition to the docket as submitted by the by Alan Martin, the treasurer, and he discovered that with the purchase of 640 Bay Street, that needs to be added as a asset to our capital facilities plan if we're able to use REIT money for that purchase. And so because we're in an agreement to purchase that, it hasn't closed yet. This needs to be added to the comprehensive plan. Otherwise, we would have to find a different revenue source to pay for that. So it's a pretty straightforward amendment. But and then if we sell the land at a later date, we'll remove it from the comprehensive plan, which maybe next year or maybe 10 years from now. But it'll stay in there as long as we have it.
All right, members of the public, we'll be taking testimony on number 8. Would any of you like to testify on number 8? Anyone? Okay, seeing no one. We'll go ahead and, Nick, I think we're going to close the public hearing at this point. So we will close the public hearing. Will you tell us how we're going to go forward from here?
Yeah, this is now, you've had an opportunity to ask questions of the public and to hear testimony. At this point, if you have questions for staff or if you'd like to deliberate amongst yourselves on each of these amendments, I'd like you to take them one by one again and go back to the South Kitsap School District Amendment, and then you can have a discussion on that. And I'm going to be over here taking notes because I have to write an ordinance that includes findings, which are essentially the reasons why you're approving a particular amendment. And so, you know, if you're in favor of something, you can state that you're in favor of this and the reason why, and I'm going to try to take those notes, and then the ordinance that I'll bring forward at the end of November will include a lot of the statements that you've made tonight about the reasons why you want to do one thing or another. And my hope is that the ordinance that I bring forward will be right the first time and won't require amendment because you guys have a pretty clear idea of which direction you want to go on each of these. But if we have to take 2 shots at the ordinance because something needs to be changed, we can change it and bring it forward in December again. So I guess the first one is the South Kitsap School District Amendment, and if there are any questions, Stephanie and I are happy to answer them, and any general thoughts that you'd like to share with the public on the proposal. Those thoughts.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I would
Mr.
just
Clausen.
make a general comment that I think it just makes sense. There's logic to what the request is, and it seems perfectly reasonable to me.
Okay. Other comments?
No, agreed. It seems as though this one is just a housekeeping from an annexation procedure. So I'm very much supportive of having all of the school district as community facilities.
Mr. Chang?
There does not seem to be any fiscal effect on the zoning because it's undeveloped. So it's not like we would be losing money that could be developed into residential parcels. But I was wondering if Nick or Stephanie, if you could elaborate on the comment from Glenn Rivera. Apparently he wrote about concerns for traffic related to the construction of a new high school.
Yeah, I think that, you know, for the South Kitsap School District to build a new high school, this is the first of many steps for them to be able to do what they want to do, and it only concerns about what is possible on the land, not necessarily with a specific proposal. And there will be environmental review for any proposal that comes forward, including mitigation of traffic, other environmental impacts. And so that would be addressed at the time that we actually have a building permit application. One difference, schools are actually allowed in the residential zone, but they are required to go through a conditional use permit process. And so that costs a few $1,000s and a couple months of time in order to go through that process. And so under the conditional use permit, you have to go to the hearing examiner to get an approval for a building permit, whereas under the community facilities zone, you come straight to the building department and then you do SEPA, which includes the public process and the environmental review. And so this makes the use of those properties, I guess, more streamlined for the school district, rather than looking at the impacts of a particular use on the neighborhood. We're basically saying today that this is going to be some type of school facility, and when we know what that facility is, we'll deal with those impacts at that time. So it really makes things a lot easier, I think, for the school district.
Any other comments? Okay. All right, we'll move on to number 2.
Yeah, that's the Living Hope Community Baptist Church amendment. And this one obviously had mixed recommendations from the Planning Commission and staff, and so I'm really curious to see what the council thinks of this so that I can try to write an ordinance that reflects what you'd like to take action on.
Mr. Childs.
I think that it would be very difficult for the church to use that building for anything else, especially if they move out of it, so I'm in favor of it.
I'm also in favor of it. I have no problem. You're talking one strip of asphalt difference between BP1 and residential, and that whole street is mixed throughout. So I say grant them the same consideration as others have had on that same strip.
And my comment on it is the business professional designation was developed as a transitional classification or designation into the residential areas. And it seems to me that this defines exactly the intent of business professional.
Okay, any other? Nick, does that give you a feel for?
Yeah, I mean, everybody else generally agree with those statements.
I have a question, and I don't know if you can answer it, but I'm wondering, is there a fiscal difference between a parcel that's zoned residential versus commercial?
Yeah, presumably the assessor would catch wind of this, and there would probably be some adjustment, but the business professional zone is so limited in what commercial uses you can do. But I haven't actually looked at properties that are zoned business professional to see how they differ from their residential neighbors.
There will be some difference, though. I mean, they're treated tax-wise slightly different. Yes. Ms. Lucarelli, it looked like you have a question.
I do. I'm in that neighborhood, and I'm wondering how many other people you contacted. Have you contacted, during the other hearing, were there neighbors that came forth to speak that were actually adjacent to your property, and any kind
Yeah.
of testimony?
We got one letter from a neighbor. He actually called and talked to me and then sent a subsequent email the night of the hearing saying that he couldn't make it. But it was hard to tell whether he was in favor of it or not. I know the letter is in your packet, but it said, look, the impacts of the church on the neighborhood are somewhat intense. There's parking issues, there's traffic, there's noise. And it seemed to me that he was saying that he supported actually a business professional use because the impacts would be less than that of the church. But I would recommend that you read it because it was a little bit hard to discern exactly whether he was a proponent or an opponent, but I got the feeling that he was in favor of this.
Well, I'm in favor of the church. I mean, I like having the church in the neighborhood, and I'm not close enough to be impacted by parking. We're impacted by parking for other events and such. But I would have a concern if the intent of this was to turn the property around within a pretty short time to something else. I mean, this is a trust issue, folks. I'm saying the church and supporting the church is not a big deal for me. I don't think people mind having people parking nearby for that use. But if you really do intend to just turn the property around, I do have issues with that. If that's going to be something other than a church, say in a year or two, I have issues with that. I do think we have to protect our residential areas, and we don't have that much in Port Orchard that's historic, and some of these neighborhoods around here are, and I really like to see them kept. So if there's a kind of a creepy crawler thing is going on, then I would be opposed to it. And I'm just sharing that with you. I'm just letting you know.
Any other? Mr. Chang?
Well, Cindy brings up a good point that once a parcel is zoned, we have no say over who owns it. So we could not make a condition that, we'll change it if you never sell it, because that's not something we do. So we would have to think we are changing the zoning. It could be for the same people or someone different. I also actually live very close to that neighborhood, and I walk by. I've been aware that we've had historically, several churches in the area, like the Methodist Church nearby was actually a great deal smaller at one time before it was expanded. And I understand that as churches grow, it's hard for them to be on a single parcel in our neighborhood. I think, there's also another one near Clayton or Central Park. And they have generally been good neighbors. There are impacts when they're in service. You do see a lot more cars. Sometimes you hear, if they have loud music, you hear the music too. But I guess those are the impacts. So on this one, I understand your concerns. I don't have a problem actually with that side of the street expanding into a different use, although I respect the delineation that's been brought up earlier, because I feel that hasn't been consistently upheld.
Any other discussion?
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, I think that's good. And the letter, again, it was from Ken Mount, and it was in your packet. If you'd like to see it, I pulled it out of mine, and I'm happy to pass it around. But
Just, John, if my memory serves me, the old Lutheran church that was on Sydney has been repurposed, and that's the one that's now the attorney office? Yeah, so this is not the first time that a church on Sydney would have been repurposed.
You mean the one that was the coroner's office was a Lutheran church?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
So the next amendment for discussion is the Vogel Amendment. And the Vogel Amendment, again, I think what Gil said about possibly bringing this forward next year is not a bad proposal if the application originated as I would like to change the upper area of the property from Greenbelt to R8 residential. But the application has submitted asking for commercial, I think probably is a difficult ask, and it was not supported at all by the public. I'd like to hear what you have to think, and the Planning Commission compromise that was proposed, if that's something that council wants to support, I can see if there's any possible way that we could do that, such as amending SEPA and having the applicant, provide some sort of statement revising his application saying that this change would be okay, or you can kick it to next year. I don't know that there's any urgency to develop this property. I think it's mostly an issue of trying to change the zoning, so I'm all ears.
Yes, sir.
I'm against this amendment as written. I agree with Mr. Michael that they should have a right to come forward again next year and do it right, and so that's where I'm coming from.
I would concur.
I would concur, defer to the attorney's opinion that as submitted, it shouldn't be modified from as submitted.
So you concur that it should come next year?
I agree that it should not be commercial, and I'm wondering if you can elaborate on what the applicant was intending at making a parcel at the end of a cul-de-sac be commercial.
Well, I think he maybe thought there was some way to access off of either Sydney or Tremont Lund directly, which from an engineering standpoint and talking to Public Works, I don't think that's probably possible because there's a drop lane for the right turn on to Sydney there to head north. He did submit documentation showing that the old zoning that he had on that property did allow for commercial uses, and so when at some point, years ago, he had allowed uses that were commercial, and I think there was even a gas station would have been allowed on that property at the time. And so he wanted to recapture, not necessarily a gas station, but perhaps I think is what he suggested was storage units. And but I think that any commercial use, especially if it accessed off of Bill, would not be supported by the neighborhood. And there were 14 or 15 people that stood up and said we're opposed to this.
I think it's 16.
17.
So I'm hearing that probably this would be brought back next year and denied for this year, but perhaps council could sponsor it again so that it would be put back on the docket as an amended proposal and
Our denial is because he asked for commercial.
yeah, exactly. So I will talk to the attorney about how to bring that forward next year in the best possible form so that it can be considered.
Okay. Number 4.
Okay, so the next one was the Bethel Road LLC, and this was a recommendation to deny from both staff and the Planning Commission, and no testimony was offered by the applicant.
Concur with the 2 denials.
Yeah, and one of the things, I didn't mention this earlier, but in the public hearing, and Stephanie had talked actually to the surveyor who drew the map showing the amended boundaries. They didn't actually go out and survey topography. They just essentially drew a new line where they wanted it. And then we compared that to the geohazard maps that we have and to other maps, and it didn't match up with the hazard area maps. And our suggestion was if you're going to do this, it should match the hazard area maps, and therefore, as proposed, it should be denied.
Okay.
Okay, the next one, the Parks Plan amendments, and this is 3 small amendments that are wrapped into one application.
I have to ask for, I have a letter here and I forgot to read it during the public testimony.
I think you could probably reopen the hearing and then read it and then close it again. I'm not sure. As a matter of parliamentary procedure, we have no Brandy or no attorney present.
Why do we not have it?
It's just one short paragraph, but it's regarding the parks, all 3.
So I think you should probably at least reopen the hearing and then close it at the end of the
part
letter.
of the record.
Bang
Okay.
your gavel.
All right. I hereby reopen the public hearing. I would like to read a letter. This is a letter, Dear City Council members, regarding the City of Port Orchard Planning Resolution number 00914. I wish to offer my input that I support the Planning Commission's recommendations of Section 1. I feel the dog park would be very advantageous. I also feel the intent of naming Clayton Park as as of great importance when named, and it should not be changed. I do not, however, support recommendation of Section 2. I'm not comfortable surplusing designated park areas, especially in the light of our city's need for more. Embracing a barrier-free ADA direction with the subject Lindbergh Park not only serves the overall needs of the community, but also opens up access to those who find our other parks more restrictive from an accessibility standpoint. Thank you for your consideration on this matter. Sincerely, Alyssa Whittleton. And she gives her address, 313 Tracy Avenue North. So that is her testimony, and I hereby close the public hearing.
Mayor?
Yes.
I think it would be appropriate, now that you read another document into the record, to keep the public hearing open and ask if anybody has a comment related to that particular letter.
All right.
There may not, but I just think that if we're trying to...
I will hereby open the public hearing and ask for any additional public comments. Any additional public comments on item 5, Parks Amendment? All right. Hereby close the public hearing, and we'll go ahead with discussion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
Nick, I'm not sure, and if I didn't pick up on it, I apologize. Why was the Planning Commission's recommendation to deny the Lundberg Park Amendment?
I think you heard some of that in the letter just now. They actually discussed whether that was a good location for a park and whether it could possibly be surplused. And so that's not the amendment that's before you, but that was the discussion that they had. And you know, their recommendation was simply just to deny that amendment, and then I think they may have, you know, some other suggestions in the future for what they think should be done with that property. So,
thank you. I didn't pick up on that. I apologize.
Yes.
Well, I would just say that I very much support making Lundberg Park a barrier-free park. I'm not sure that everyone understands what a barrier-free park is, and it's not just ADA accessible, but allows people with limited mobility the opportunity to walk in the woods or take their wheelchair in the woods or their walker in the woods. I personally, for several years, maintained a barrier-free trail down at Mount St. Helens around one of their campsites. Anyway, a friend and I went down there 2 or 3 times a year and made sure that the trail itself has to be a certain width, and we made sure that it was always free so that people in wheelchairs or walkers had access to the woods and to the river. And the first time that I went to Lundberg Park, because it had been used as an RV park in the past, it already had wonderfully wide, what had been a road or a driveway. And it just seemed absolutely perfect to me to be a barrier-free park. And that was why I had mentioned it to the mayor, and also that I know that in the past there had been federal funding to develop barrier-free parks. And it would probably have the least impact on that property of anything else we could do back there.
Yes. I'd like to speak to that too. When you mentioned that, that was and we went out to look at it, it really does have hard-packed surfaces that are already in place. With just a little bit of parking, a little bit of additional parking, it's still right out of the car, right off onto the park area. We'll only be talking about 2 acres, the upper 2 acres. I think it would really be a nice addition to our park system, and it would be a park that folks that need that type of access don't have very much right now. So I think it'd be something, it'd be a nice addition for us to have. Yes.
I would hate to see that park sold, and I would like to hold it within our park system. I'm just not sure if this is a good time to develop it for that purpose. And I suppose if you've got funding, that would be different. But I would let it, almost is like a rainforest in there, and it's so unusual. So I would support keeping the park. I do not want to have that surplused. I just don't know that that would be a priority with the park system now because we have so many other projects.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm very much in support of parks, and I'm not necessarily think that if we put this on a plan and designate it as a barrier-free park, it's still going to fall into our priorities wherever funding gets. I mean, it could be 10, 20 years before anything's actually done with the property in terms of no barrier or whatever. So I'm in favor. I would be supportive of the staff's recommendation with an understanding that nothing gets spent until we all approve the money to be spent.
Yes.
I also think that it's just a matter of time before that area is developed a little further so that it wouldn't be so isolated as it is now because it's a place where you could go basically and disappear off the planet. It's kind of scary over there, and I think a lot of interesting things have been done in there, but that won't always be the case, and as we build around that area, I think it will be much safer. But for now, I wouldn't put anyone out there in a wheelchair. No.
Mr. Clausen.
I have mixed emotions about this. I certainly would be against selling it. I think we should hang on to it. And I agree with you, Cindy. I think at some point in the future, it's going to be a very valuable piece of ground for a park. But I also do remember that when the thing was set up for an RV park, it was a major problem for our police department. So that concerns me a little bit when we try to develop it and create parking out there, that I want to make sure that our police department is involved in that discussion. So,
Well, I just want to remind you, we have no immediate funding or plans other than maybe possibly putting in for some of that federal.
Yeah. This is really about checking a box on a grant application, I think. Otherwise, nothing's probably going to happen unless the council decides to raise a bunch of park revenue for the project.
I think when we sit down to figure out what we're going to do with that piece of property or how we're going to develop it, we definitely need the police department's input into it. So
Definitely. Okay.
I'm actually not in favor of any of these. I'm not in favor of changing the name to Clayton, even though it's Clayton already. People like to call it Central, let them call it Central. I think it's a little bit what John said earlier about the council, if they choose, can just name a park. We don't have to have it in a comp plan or anything like that. The dog park idea for the park known on this page as South Park, but this gentleman would like to be something else. I'm not sure that's the best use of that property, and I'm not sure that I'm in any mood to try and decide, should it be a dog park at this point? And I'm not really sure whether the other park that we're talking about, Lundberg, should be a barrier-free park at this point either. Maybe we're going to sell it, maybe we're not. So frankly, I think this is the tail before the horse, and I'm not in favor of any of these.
You're the Grinch tonight.
I am, aren't I? And by the way, could I just say, are you guys just polite and waiting here? I mean, you know we've addressed the church deal. Are you just that interested in the rest of this, or would you like to get out of here and you're just a little nervous about standing up and all walking out, because you don't have to stay. I mean, I can see this look. Some of you are kind of going like this.
Yeah. How much longer?
Feel free to leave. People do it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chang.
I'm somewhat neutral on these, although I tend to agree with Jerry that I thought the park. Good night.
Good night, guys.
I thought the park was already named Clayton Park, and we were going to change it to Central Park. So,
yeah,
you know,
it's really a housekeeping issue of our plan to change. I mean, even though the official name is Clayton Park by a motion that was made by council in the 70s, the fact that our documents say otherwise, I can't change those documents without council approving the amendment. And so it's as frivolous as it seems. It's
I actually like it like Central Park.
I do too. I live in the neighborhood and I like Central Park. Everyone refers to it as that. The kids know it as that. Can't see changing it now.
Well, it was already changed.
Okay, well, we'll change it back.
1972. Yeah.
We'll just make it official.
So maybe we can go one by one. So on the Clayton Park amendment, you know, as far as people supporting that, it's hard for me to keep track with 3 different proposals and kind of comments meandering around.
I'm fine with the Clayton designation.
I go
People
to
are going to call whatever they want, but it's officially Clayton Park.
Central.
I don't live there. I really don't have an opinion, but if it's technically referred to as Clayton, then I'm all for dotting our i's and crossing our t's.
Okay. I heard Jerry loud and clear.
Yes, and I would support making sure that all of our documentation says Clayton Park.
Okay.
I would go for Central.
Right. So I'll talk to. I'm not sure that Councilmember Putanzu is going to participate in the vote, but talk to the mayor about it afterwards and bring you guys an ordinance on that one. So as far as the ADA off our accessible park for Lundberg Park,
I don't have a problem with that designation.
You want like a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Yeah,
or
sure.
Yes or no?
For which
Thumbs
one?
up.
for
Number
the
2.
Lundberg Park ADA accessible, barrier free.
You want thumbs up or thumbs down?
Okay. All right. I got that one.
I did.
Some of us put our thumbs up.
I counted a majorities, and so that's all I need to write an ordinance.
Counted 4 thumbs.
And then finally for the dog park at South Park.
That looks like a tie. That is a
Let's
tie.
see. Yes, it is a tie again. I'll talk to the mayor and possibly to Councilmember.
I'd like to
Putanzu.
comment on that, Nick.
Yeah.
I would love to see a dog park in this town, but that location actually doesn't seem appropriate for a dog park, from what I know of it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's such a busy area, and I can't imagine dogs there. But I would like to look into some area for a dog park. So what do we do with that? So you're just asking
Different subject.
for that use?
Yeah, we would just be simply designating that use as, right now there's a table that shows all the uses for each park in the comp plan, and an off-leash park is an option, and that one currently isn't designated for that use. So. But yeah, I mean, I think there are probably plenty of other alternatives, and you could even propose seeking property, and that could be an amendment next year, would be to, you know, seek property and to budget a certain amount of money, or to plan for spending a certain amount of money to acquire the property for a dog park. But that's not before us tonight.
Mr. Clausen had your hand up, and then
Yes, I did.
Mr. Cartwright.
Couple reasons. One, I don't think there's been enough discussion about what is the appropriate use for that park. To me, it feels like it's something that's just being thrown at us, and here, make a decision. The second thing, I guess I still kind of object in principle that we're doing these kinds of decisions as part of the comp plan. I appreciate what you need to do and designate in your plan, but I think parks are a decision that should and could be made separate from the comp plan process. I think going to the extent of naming a park, it just doesn't feel right doing it in this process. And if we are, then I want to make sure that we get the process as suggested here to name it after the Tripp family that donated it. I think that is extremely appropriate, and I certainly intend to pursue that, but I don't think this is the floor to do it in.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the benefits of having discussion is you get to think about things as things are being discussed, and I'm not quite sure that's the best location for a dog park either, now that I think about it. I know that probably close to 9 or 10 months ago we had a discussion on a soccer field in the city when we were looking at Paul Powers Park. And my feeling at that time that I believe I expressed was that if we were going to do a major sports complex or something of significance in the $2 to $3 million artificial turf range, that might be a better location for something like that, because it has a lot more support in that local area as far as food choices for people that are going to be there tournament all day, and those types of things. So I think there needs to be a lot more discussion at that particular location on what future use we'd like to see, and I'm not sure this is the venue on that. I don't have a problem with Clayton, and but this one, I'm going to change my mind on.
Okay. Comments?
Okay. And I'll just follow up that discussion. You know, one of the things that is pretty apparent to me in talking to my staff and looking at our existing park plan, you know, the park plan that we have, we largely followed a template of another city, and it was done at the Planning Commission, but it wasn't a real public outreach type of thing where we came up with a park plan that had a solid base of support from the public. I think it is a parks plan from the standpoint that it has all the required elements, it has a budget, it has capital facilities plans and everything else, but long-term, that's something that should probably be considered, is actually hiring somebody to do a real parks plan where you go out into the community and you meet with the people who use the parks and ask them how they use it and what they want it to be like. But, you know, that's a whole nother discussion.
I would totally concur, but I would say that to try to designate a specific use for this particular property, the Tripp property, I mean, when we first acquired that property, there was a lot of discussion about a senior center as a potential use for that particular ground. Whether that's a good use or not, I don't know. It's one option that's been discussed. Now we've got a dog park that's being discussed. There could be any of a number of uses. I just think there needs to be more discussion before we just grab something that's in front of us and designate it. And I own a dog. I don't have a problem with dog parks, but I just think it's just grabbing it.
Actually, it says the whole park. It leads you to think the whole park would be designated. That was never the intent. It was about 175 by 275 foot, a natural cleared area that's already there. It was the only thing designated as a park. But we needed to have it on our park plan before we could consider it, right? That's the whole idea of...
Well, I think that in order to, you know, take this through some sort of process where it's vetted, the comp plan process is one option. Another option would be to go out and do some sort of charrette like we did for McCormick Park, where they came up with a park-specific plan. And so not having the resources to do that, you know, this was the only option that we really have to take something through a process that, you know, meets the requirements of state law. And
I just don't think this is a process that you would garner much input on a park. Comp plan is typically land use type actions, not what should we have for a park in our community. That's why I just have a hard time with this process.
I think also, I don't know if this meets what John is saying, but, you know, I just don't have an appetite for doing anything with it right now. So that's where I'm coming from.
I've got enough information to write up an ordinance on that one.
All right, let's go
So the next
on.
one is the transportation plan, adding it to Appendix G. Is there any?
Local centers was the next one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. So the local centers amendment is the next one.
2 thumbs up so far. 3, 4, 5.
Okay, pretty straightforward.
We did that one.
I agree with, as you addressed it when we had it presented initially, that having centers designated makes a lot of sense for the next one as well, the transportation plan, as well as KRCC. It will help us in scoring, so.
Yep. Second.
All right, so now we're at the transportation plan amendment to add the 6-year TIP and the 2011 transportation plan to Appendix G.
Yes.
Thumbs up. Just as you said.
And finally, the capital facilities plan amendment to add 640 Bay Street as a property reserved for future economic development. I see mostly thumbs up there.
I'm down.
Okay.
All right.
Could I just ask, Mr. Mayor, is this like an official meeting? Do we need to excuse Mr.
Yes,
Patonsu?
I think we do.
If
and-
so, I'd make a motion to excuse Mr. Patonsu, who has a work conflict.
Seconded.
Okay, motion
The
is second.
terminology is unavoidable primary employment schedule.
Yes.
Oh.
Exactly. Couldn't said it better.
I also have a question as to why we don't have the city clerk here tonight.
We have one of the clerk's staff here recording the meeting, but I think it's a scheduling issue, and this was somewhat, I think we decided on this about 4 weeks
and
ago.
That was my,
Well,
and
I wanna
that was my call, by the way. I have some staff here for us.
What about the attorney? Is
My
it,
call again. Wasn't necessary tonight.
I was wondering if I was necessary, but I came anyway.
We have a motion and a second on the floor to excuse Councilman Patonsu. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Okay, Mr. Bond, we're at business item B, wayfinding signs. Actually, it's Councilwoman Ashby.
I will defer to Mr. Bond.
Okay. So, first of all, at our last meeting, I apologize that we had so much on the agenda. If I knew that we were going to go until 11:30, I would have postponed that presentation until tonight. So I'm sorry that that meeting went longer than it probably needed to. But I think the presentation was good, a little long-winded, but it really walked you through the decision-making process in terms of how we arrived at the three alternatives that were presented. And my question now, I guess, is how do we want to move forward with selecting one of the alternatives? And you know, you can potentially open this up to a public process, but there are some pitfalls to doing that, in that we have a set contract amount as far as you know, how much work we're going to put into this. And if we bring it to the public, it's going to be, you know, pick your favorite one, but we don't want to invite too much feedback that's going to result in having to redesign things or anything like that at this point. And so I think as long as the three alternatives that you see are acceptable for, you know, public presentation, you could put it out on either Facebook or some other platform for citizen involvement, or the council could discuss what they like about each of them and make a selection now so that we can complete the project.
Yes, Ms. Lucarelli.
Nick, for one thing, I thought that the work that was done was very nice, but I don't think it fits Port Orchard. And when I look at it, I think international airport, I think large new area, new shopping area. I don't see historic in this. And this is going to be, these are wayfinding signs to our historic downtown. So I'm not opposed to the look, but I don't think it's appropriate for Port Orchard. So here I am saying that I know you've spent considerable amount of time, and the man that you chose as a designer also creates signs. Does he create signs that look any different than this, or is this just his trademark? That was my question. Have you ever seen any work that looks anything different than this? To me, it's very modern. It's when we created the design regs for the DOD, and I worked on several of those committees, we talked about trying to keep downtown Port Orchard in particular looking a certain way, and I don't think these signs meet the criteria of the DOD design regs. They're cool, but I don't think they're Port Orchard. So, and I also think the color palette he was talking about when he made this collage of photos, to me these photos look like they were taken pretty much on the same day, and it was really a gloomy, cloudy day, kind of, and very dismal. And I don't see Port Orchard as this gray, cloudy, dark place. I think that's what we want to get away from. So I went home and I said, this is not Port Orchard. I've got tons of photos. They don't look like this. They're brighter. I think we're trying to get away from a dull feeling, and I can go on for half an hour, Nick, but I won't. So I'm just saying, this to me is not Port Orchard. And I know you don't live here, and I know the man that you hired doesn't live here. And I don't know how the rest of you feel, but this, to me, is not acceptable for our town. Just saying.
I think at the last meeting, you talked about the fact we'd have a couple weeks to then make our comments about the presentation. I think that's what Cindy's probably doing now, and tonight we're talking about the procedure for making the decision. So this is all, what you're requesting tonight almost seems like it's getting ahead of ourselves because we still haven't taken the 2 weeks and making our
It potentially is
comments about what we thought overall.
It is potentially getting ahead of ourselves if the thought is that this needs to go back and be reworked or some other alternative. But per the contract, in terms of getting to a deliverable, the consultant worked with the committee that was appointed to come up with the alternatives, and going back and revisiting that or coming up with new concepts is not in the contract that we have at this point in time. So it would probably require a revision to the contract to go back, or some alternative scenario.
I also want to just add that I spent considerable time this last week poking around Gig Harbor, and the last time I was in Port Townsend. And those are places I go that I really enjoy. And I looked at some of their wayfinding signage, and it just isn't as stark and modern as this. We don't have any wood elements in any of this. And I know these are the kind, we made a whole list of materials that we thought we'd like to see in our development. I don't really see that reflected in these decisions, which I'm disappointed in, to be quite honest with you.
Having been serving on the committee that came up with the 3 final options, we went through many iterations and pages, and I personally like them. I like all of them. But to me, they do say Port Orchard. And I don't see them as modern. I see them as marine. I see them as more mariner. And they, yeah. See, I enjoy all 3 of them. And what I had thought might be a reasonable public involvement with it would be to put it again on some sort of social platform and ask people maybe just to list them 1, 2, 3, or which one do you like or don't like, but not to get a lot of feedback so that we would have to start or reevaluate the process.
Let's go to work study and talk about it sometime. I don't know that tonight is the night to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, it's a pretty good time to talk about it. We have a lot of stuff the rest of this year to do, including the budget. So,
our contract is up at the end of the year, and they still have a good 6 weeks of work left in order to complete the programming and the actual layout of what sign goes where and the content that is on those signs, and to write the bid specs for being able to take these to a contractor to bid. And so, if I understand that we need time to digest this, and the thought was that we would discuss this at the last meeting and then give it 2 weeks and then come forward with a decision. Otherwise, this thing is going to have to go into next year just based on the schedule for delivering the product.
If you're going to take some action on the fact that you don't think this is Port Orchard, we're going to go another direction, then we need more money in the budget too, because we spent a lot of the budgeted money to get this far with these 3 options.
That's sad, I think, actually.
Yeah. Well, it's fact.
Was that $55,000 just for design? It wasn't for construction?
There was $40,000 for designing the entire system, programming, coming up with alternatives, and working with a committee with public and elected officials on it. And from that, we were going to have bid-ready documents that we could then take to sign makers and say, give us a quote to build this exact sign as spec'd out on this sheet. It's just like designing a roadway. You have an engineering level drawing that you can then bid. And so this is the design portion of the entire system.
So there's another 15,000 left in the,
No, there's more than that. I don't think we've probably spent half of the contract amount to get this far, and the rest of it is going to be spent once we've selected the preferred alternative so that they can put together the bid specs. Up to this point, it's been all of the conceptual, the logo concepts and the sign concepts, and then
And color, and
and color, and meeting with the group that was put together to study this stuff.
Nick, can you remind everybody who's on the wayfinding committee?
The wayfinding committee, the mayor and Mark Dorsey and myself, that Councilmember Ashby, the Chris Stansberry, Trish Tierney, Amy Miller, is that her name, and Gary Johnson are there are 4 citizen members, 2 staff, and 2 electeds.
I'm not an artist. Just ask my ex-wife. There's a blue bedroom in our old house that you have to wear shades when you go in because I got to pick the color. My 2 cents is I like this one. So,
What number?
3.
With the weather
I liked
seal.
it. I liked it when I saw it first presented, and I still like it. And I guess we'll have to take it to work study to figure out where we go from here. But that's my 2 cents.
I lean towards number 1, but what I'm wondering is, based on what Cindy said, the shape of some of the elements. I remember what he was talking about, the wave thought, but sort of the curvy sign portion. Those, we could just make those square. I mean, that would be very traditional. I love the blue color, whether it's 2 colors blue or light blue and dark blue with a wave in it, I'm neutral.
And as far as the material, the construction material, he was very conscious of what would weather well, particularly in our climate and with the salt air. He was very conscious of each element and how it would weather, and also the cost of fabrication.
Beck, it doesn't even go with the lights that have been chosen for downtown, which are all painted green. The benches are green. How does this fit in with what we actually have already? How does it fit in?
I didn't know that we had lights selected for downtown.
yeah.
We've been investing in lights, the whole area down by the pier, all of that. There's green lights, green benches.
Well, I hate green, so this is a great compromise.
Hey, well, you hate green, but we've actually been purchasing green. So this is like, how many times are we going to throw out what we have to go with new? Just wondering.
Well, we want signs to contrast with furniture, though, so that might not be a bad thing.
Oh, Fred.
You want signs that stand out and get people's attention. You don't want them to think it's something you walk into.
Okay, whatever. I think it would be a good thing to go ahead and ask some, put it out for public comment and see what you get.
Like I said, I still think this should go to work study and get around the table and hammer this out. This is a special meeting, and it's actually an extension of the meeting from last Tuesday. And it's actually a horrible choice because we have a lot going on tonight in our communities and our country. And so I'm a little bit irritated even about being here. So there's my 2 cents.
Is that a motion, Jerry, to move this to work study?
Yes.
Second.
How full is work study?
My understanding is that the budget discussion is on the next work study for November, and typically the December work study is only held if it's an emergency because the budget didn't get passed by that time. So, I mean, potentially this goes to January unless we're going to have a long meeting in November.
When's the contract due?
So there's a motion on the floor.
And there was a second.
you were the second?
I was.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Hearing
No discussion. The motion on the floor was to discuss this in some work study in the future as soon as we can find a place for it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
No.
Okay. The records show that motion carries. What's your pleasure?
Good night.
Motion to adjourn and a second. We stand adjourned.